Hey, welcome back to Pastor. I'm your host, Rob Trubia. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to thank all of our loyal listeners out there. We appreciate you so much. And if this is your first time listening, we hope you'll subscribe and never miss another episode. And thank you for being here. Our episode today is packed with practical parenting advice that we hope will guide not just pastors in the raising of their kids, but all Christians alike. This is a great episode for any parent out there that doesn't just want to raise kids that love them, but kids who love the church. And maybe now you know who to share this episode with. All right, here we go. Well, Wes, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Rob. It's good to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one, Wes. I think you'll have a lot to say about this. I think you've got a couple kids yourself.
A few.
Yeah, we're going to talk about children. We're going to talk specifically about, well, not just pastors, but we're going to focus in on pastors' children.
Okay.
But also just others that go to church, Christians, and how to raise kids that don't hate the church. I'm curious, do you think pastors in particular are maybe susceptible to having kids that might resent the church?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, why is that? Is it just the dad's kind of a target?
Well, I think if you step back from that specific scenario and you just ask yourself the question, why do kids like or dislike anything? I think the old adage that the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree doesn't grow very far from the apple. Generally, kids follow the likes and dislikes of their parents. That's very typical. Even kids that are in rebellion, if you kind of dissect their lives, there's a ton of stuff that looks a lot like their parents. So the question then is, why might pastors be more susceptible to having kids that don't like the church? I think it's because the pastors and the pastor's wife doesn't like the church.
You think they're grumbling at home?
Yeah, and I think it's easy to do that.
Because I'm thinking, who likes the church more than the pastor?
Yeah, no. The question would be, who gets beat up more by the church than the pastor? And so, if the pastor has a board that's not perhaps thrilled with his job, if the pastor has parishioners who are unhappy with the work that he's doing, and then he vents a little bit like that, so now the wife is unhappy about the way her husband's being treated. And, I've heard it for years. People say, well, we never complain in front of the kids. I just don't think that's true. I think kids figure out what's going on real fast. I mean, kids can tell if their parents really aren't getting on well with one another. Well, we never fight in front of the kids. Well, they know you're not happy. They can tell you that.
Think they're pretty perceptive?
Yeah. And I don't think people are very good at hiding how they really feel. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. You can't really not talk about how you actually feel. You might veil it or tamp it down a little bit. You might minimize the drama of it, but we reveal ourselves all the time. So I think pastors have a particularly difficult job because they're having to keep their head in the midst of perhaps an unhappy congregation, especially if they're agents of change. I'm not saying if the pastors have failed to do their job or there's just some sort of, egregious sin, obviously. But, just kind of in the normal sense, pastor's out there, he's trying to do his best, and he's not feeling the love. And, maybe they're not giving him a raise. Maybe they're unwilling to do a retirement program. I mean, there could be a million things that could produce an unhappy attitude. And I'll generalize it. You show me kids that are unhappy with the church, I'll show you parents who are unhappy with the church. And I've confronted a lot of parents on this over the years. I said, your kids are in youth group, and they're kids aren't subtle. They're just letting it fly. And, the parents are being much more coy about it. But I'm like, look, there's got to be some issues here. Your kids aren't evaluating a church in any kind of real way. They don't know, is this good doctrine? Is it good preaching? Is it church structure sound? Blah, 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 blah. No, they're just hearing what you say. I mean, kids vote for the same candidates their parents do. If you're for this candidate, the kids are going to argue for that candidate at school. It's just the way that it goes. If you support this team, I've got 5 kids that 4 or 5 love the Ohio State Buckeyes. One of them doesn't care about sports. If he did, he'd cheer for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And, my girls, they don't really care much about football, really. They don't feel the passion for the football, but like Dad and Mom are for Ohio State. Well, we're Ohio State fans then. So I think you show me some kids that are unhappy with the church, I'll show you some parents that are unhappy with the church. The greatest thing my wife did was love our church, and the kids picked that up. She saw, and my wife wasn't naive. It wasn't like she didn't see all the problems. It's not like she didn't hurt when I was attacked, but she loved the church. And the kids, they saw that we loved the church. We weren't grumbling about the church in general. That was not our spirit. And so I think pastors' kids are a little more susceptible. They're a little more vulnerable because it's a little easier for pastors to kind of take it on the chin.
Is there anything that you think makes it even harder for maybe a church planting pastor or a revitalizing pastor that makes it a little bit more difficult to get your kid to like the church? I mean, maybe it's more stressful. There's more work, especially for a church plant. You're getting there early, you're staying late, there's setup, there's takedown, those kinds of things. How do you keep your kid from resenting all of that?
Yeah. I think you keep your kid from resenting all that by working hard at mastering the art of connection. Because obviously for a church planting pastor, he's going to be very busy. It's a form of starting a business. And anyone that starts a business knows you have to hoof it. You just have to work hard. There's no question about it. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. If you want to start a business and you somehow think you can work less hours, please don't even go down that path. You're going to be working 70 hours until you get that business up and going. And a guy that starts a church, he and his wife have to be on board with that. But to avoid the kids feeling like they're chopped liver, you have to make decisions to probably root out just about all other discretionary activities. Things that you might like to do. You like to go golfing. I've always played trumpet in little groups. None of that's possible. They had a baseball league when I first moved to Vermont. It was for 35-year-olds and older, and it was a pretty competitive league. We had a lot of college guys that played in the league. There were some former Boston Red Sox guys. Bill Spaceman Lee was a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox. He played in that league.
Wow.
And I got a chance to play in that league. And I just couldn't meet the time demands of it, because I played 1 or 2 games every Sunday and had a practice midweek. And baseball takes a lot of time. So you got to kind of peel back on all the discretionary activities and instead decide your primary discretionary activity, if you will, is connecting with your kids. That you're really working to be in tune with them in a way that they feel like you're in tune with them. And I'm not a natural at it. I've worked very hard at it. But I think that's the way to push back on any possible resentment. I don't think kids mind you being busy, but I do think they mind being ignored. I think they mind being kind of an afterthought. And so we worked hard to stay connected with our kids. There's a certain truth to quality over quantity. There has to be some quantity, but the bigger issue is it good quality time? Is there a mutual understanding? And I worked really hard to try to be connected with my kids. My kids are very different. Some of them easier to connect with than others. But I think they all appreciated that the effort was being extended. We weren't just pursuing, Sue and I weren't just pursuing our own interests. We pursued the interest of planting a church, and then we kind of cleared the decks so that we had the bandwidth available, even working 70 hours. I mean, I probably worked 70 hours my whole career because we started Nets. And so I think that that's the key, is working at connecting. And Sue was really helpful in helping me understand what it means to connect. She's very good at connecting. She just has a very good relational gear. that's a beautiful blend of truth and grace. And she kind of tutored me, and I was willing to learn because I knew, gosh, I'm behind the eight ball on this one. I'm starting off 25, 30, 45 yards behind the line of scrimmage on this one from my background. Connecting wasn't any part of my background.
And the stakes are higher, right? Because you're the pastor of a church. You're not just starting a new venture. It's not like if the kids start to resent the business, if it's just some, investment company, whatever it might be, that's one thing. But when they start to resent the church and then they bring that with them, because you're not bringing your kids to your new business, but you're bringing your kids, you're bringing your wife, your family is wrapped around that church.
Yes, they are.
So if they've got bad attitudes because of your lack of ability to connect when you've got the time to do it, we got a problem.
Yeah. So I think really they need to know that, yes, you're busy, but they're the apple of your eye, and you're trying to validate that every day.
I think this could be helpful, of course, to other moms and dads, not just pastors and pastors' wives, this specific question. Can you just give me some examples, concrete? You say connect. Wes, I want to know what you mean by connecting. Give me an example, please, of connecting with your son or daughter.
Yeah. I think it's convincing your kids that you're really interested in them and you're interested in their interests.
They're not flying under the radar.
They're not flying under the radar. And, we had 5 kids. If you have 5 kids, you're going to have real diversity. And the kids are going to have interests in things that you're not necessarily interested in. So, for instance, one of my sons at some point got interested in opera. And I have had no background in opera. I like music. I particularly like jazz music. Opera seemed stuffy to me, and usually in a foreign language, so I couldn't understand it anyways. But he was very interested in that, and, I tried to get interested in it. He got a bit part when he was in college in an opera, and I made all the arrangements I could to go and hear him. And I even got interested in one opera singer, Luciano Pavarotti. I've kind of become a Pavarotti sycophant's too strong, but
You're a fan.
I listen to his music, and I've learned some things about some different operas. That's not an interest that I natively had, but because it's an interest for my son, I decided I was going to be interested in it. My daughter, I had a daughter that was a real horse girl. I don't value horses. I mean, I like to watch the Kentucky Derby, but, horses just aren't a part of my life. I'm not a farmer. I don't need horses. I don't have any cowboy aspirations. They're not a part of my life. But I bought 2 horses. Horses take a lot of care. You got to do a lot of stuff to have horses. And because she was interested in them. And when she suggested that I should learn to ride a horse and then we could go riding together, I agreed to that, even though there's no natural inclination that way. And I kind of didn't really want to be around them. They're big, they got big teeth, they're dirty, you got to saddle them, they got to brush them. I mean, that's lots of care. I'd rather have a hamster. But we ended up riding together quite a bit. So I'm affirming their interests and being willing to participate in the things that they're interested in. So it's not just, hey, get on my bandwagon, follow what I'm interested in, do what I want to do. It's a genuine reaching out to them on their terms and affirming that you care about their life by following their interests a bit. So those are a couple examples.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to look different for different kids.
It's going to look different. That's right.
It seems like a great practice for several reasons, but one just comes to mind is that it kind of forces you to pay attention.
It does.
It's like what are they into right now? Because kids change their interests, and that's
right.
That's great. That's
right.
That's perfectly natural and a good thing.
Yeah, you're just. I think when kids feel like you genuinely want to understand them, and if you're taking responsibility for your shortcomings, I think kids hate hypocrisy. And hypocrisy is you holding them to a standard that you yourself are not being held to. And you're free to fail as long as it's acknowledged, I just failed. This is the standard for our family, and I just failed to meet that standard, and I'm going public with that. Kids forgive very easily in that context. It's just hypocrisy, which is another thing that drives them from the church. They see how you act on Sunday, and then they see how you act at home, and they see a big gap. That'll drive them away faster than anything. So I think when you're really working to understand them, when you're taking responsibility for your own shortcomings in an unvarnished way, I think the kids are drawn to that. They're drawn to you, they respect you, and they're therefore not going to just go all nuclear on you when it comes to the church.
Yeah, and it sounds like if you're doing your due diligence, if you're connecting, when those times come, when, and inevitably they do for everyone, particularly, though, a pastor, particularly someone planting a new church or revitalizing a church, there's just some weeks, I'm sure, that
That's
are just
right.
outrageous.
That's right.
Your kids are giving you some grace because you're connecting
Yes.
when you can.
Another important feature in not having your kids hate the church is you've got to be clear to separate what is biblically mandated and what's a preference. So, for instance, I do not prefer country music. In fact, I'll go stronger and say I hate country music. I don't value it as good music, so I just have a prejudice against it. Well, one of my daughters really got into country music. Now, I could have come down and, because not all country music is good, ethical music. I mean, the women that sing seem like they got a lot of attitude sometimes. They're just kind of swashbuckling and, the Reba McEntire kind of feel. But there was a decision that I made that this is a preference. She has a preference for a kind of music that I don't like. And why should I impose and try to spiritualize, that you shouldn't be listening to this music? I was tempted. I struggled with it. But at the end of the day, thankfully, my wife kind of put her hand on my shoulder that this isn't a battle. And I think trying to not impose your own prejudices, your own preferences, which may have some biblical basis, but it's still not a right or a wrong. And so really giving the child the freedom to be who they are and not imposing your own arbitrary values on them. I think kids figure that out. Like what is modesty? And you got daughters. What is modesty? There's a lot there that's very subjective. And again, Sue helped me to navigate that. And we came to a happy meeting of the minds, even though the styles were not what I would prefer. But that's me. There's not a definition of modesty in the Bible. It's pretty relative, and it changes from age to age, from culture to culture. 100 years ago, no women were wearing pants. And now most evangelicals would not say that wearing pants is immodest. Women are wearing
versa dress.
The women are wearing yoga pants now.
That's just normal.
It's just normal. It's become normal. But 100 years ago, it was only dresses, down pretty low. Knees, ankles, length dresses. So I think when the kids feel like you're not, this religiosity doesn't sort of straitjacket their individuality, it's not so easy to be resentful of it.
There's got to be, though, added pressure for the pastor and his children, his wife and his children, to present a certain, more of a conservative attire, that type of thing. I mean, Pastor so-and-so's daughter's coming in at 14 years old, showing her midriff and that kind of thing. It's got to be a little bit harder for the pastor to say, listen, we can't, we're trying to set an example here. People judge. Or it could be, like you said, the music that they're listening to. Or maybe it's something as benign as they've got a little tiny earring type diamond thing in their nose, not in the earlobes, but the 15-year-old was given permission by the pastor and his wife to get the little diamond earring in the nose.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. Now every kid in the church automatically knows that they can have a diamond in their nose.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, how are you balancing that?
Well,
without having kids who resent, like, oh, great. So because you're my dad, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah, we tried not to sing that song. We really tried hard not to play that tune, that because you're the pastor's kid, ergo. Our mindset was, we're going to raise you according to biblical standards, and we're not going to apologize for that. We're not going to, feel sheepish about that. But we want to make sure that we're not going beyond what the Bible demands. Again, it's trying to separate preferences, and I don't prefer a lot of piercings. I think we just need one hole for an earring on either ear. I think some people, they don't think you should get pierced at all. But, I'm okay with that. And I'm pretty sure all of my daughters have more piercings on their ears. And I don't prefer that look, even though it's so common today. It's just run-of-the-mill today. But it's not wrong. And so giving them freedom to operate within what I think is biblical freedom, I think is really important to avoid resentment and certainly to try to impose your convictions because they're the pastor's kid. That's a recipe for resentment, I think. So we worked real hard to do that. We worked real hard to let our kids just be part of the church, part of the youth group, and if they didn't step up to leadership or do something like that, it was okay. They didn't have to. And we wanted them to just be who they were and worked hard to affirm that. I think that helped, keep the temperature pretty low.
Maybe not when you were raising your kids, Wes. They're all grown adults now. But I imagine right now, having young teenagers, I bet the tattoo thing comes up all the time. Tattoos are extremely popular.
Yes, they are.
So having your 13, 14, 15-year-old son or daughter, you're a pastor's kid, they want a tattoo. I'm curious if you've got not an opinion on whether or not you like tattoos. I'm just going to guess you don't like tattoos or you're not into tattoos.
I'm not into tattoos.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But how do you process that as you're talking right now to pastors out there that have got 14-year-olds that want a tattoo, 16-year-olds that want a tattoo? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Again, I think it's in the preference category. And obviously you need to help them think through. I mean, they're expensive, so there's a piece there. And I know you can get tattoos reversed, can't you?
I think you can. I think it's difficult. It's not
difficult.
fun. It's painful, I think.
Painful. So you're trying to help them be wise. But you could choose and say you don't have the freedom to make that decision until you're 18. It was not an issue. None of my kids wanted that, and I'm grateful. But I think the ideal response would be, we're not going to just come down and pull the verse out of the Old Testament that prohibits tattoos. There is a verse in the Old Testament. You probably know that, Rob. We're not going to use that. I think a lot of those restrictions are not in play for us right now. So I'd want to work with that. And again, not impose my disdain for tattoos. I mean, I hardly see anything good about them, but I don't think they're sinful necessarily. I don't want to impose that. I want to let them be who they are. And the older they get, you're trying to give them more freedom. That's part of the weaning process. So I got a 16-year-old. Dad, I'd like to get a tattoo. I'd want to see, does it seem discreet? Does it seem like we're just being ostentatious about it? We'd want to talk about those kinds of things.
It's not just no.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's not just
That'll
no.
shut your kid down real quick.
Yeah, it'll shut them down real quick. And they were like, I really hate that I'm growing up in this family.
Talking about just raising children, just in general, I wondered if we might maybe sort of like play a little game, a little round robin here.
All right.
Maybe take about a minute. Maybe you could take a minute and a half. I'm not going to have a timer on you, but I'm just going to say, what do you see as the overarching goals during particular phases? We're going to take them in 5-year chunks. So what is the goal of a parent, whether it's a pastor or just a parent, maybe father, mother? for these different age groups, and we're just going to just go down the.
All right.
So see what you can tell me.
All right.
What's the goal here? 0 to 5 years old. What are we trying to accomplish?
I think that's dog training. You're trying to potty train the child. You're wanting to teach them, in our family, teach them to sit at the table and eat what they're served. So you're trying to help them not be fussy eaters. You're trying to get them into a good routine of going to bed, getting up in the morning, trying to begin to help them to have some sense of hygiene, brushing their teeth, all those sort of basic things. You're trying to get them to respect your word, which corporal discipline is a necessity to do that, so that when you say something, you want them to respond respectfully to what you've said. So that's a very important time for shaping their understanding of mom and dad are in authority, and when they speak, we don't want to be fussing. I want to teach them that fussing is sin, and that when they're asked to do something, that they do it.
All right, how about 6 to 10? What's going on there?
Yeah, 6 to 10, you're reinforcing everything that you were doing 0 to 5. And I think 6 to 10 is a bit of a discovery time. It's a fun time. That may be the funnest age of all. And I've got several grandkids that are in that age. And they're interested. They're easy to work with. They think you're funny. They think you're witty. They actually like to be with their parents in those ages. So I think you're engaging them. A lot of times kids start sports in those age groups a little bit. They might start music in that time. You're really trying to gauge interest and start developing them in that interest. For me, I wanted them to learn how to read. I wanted them to understand some basic things about grammar. So there was some educational things that I felt strongly about.
Yeah, it is. It's a great time because they just still want to jump in your arms.
They still want to jump in your arms.
But you can have a conversation.
That's right.
You can share interests.
That's right.
It's super
the
great.
care level isn't nearly what it was.
You could say, get in the car.
Yeah.
And they can get in the car. You don't have to put them in the car seat.
Put them in the car. Yeah, that's right. They can actually fix their own breakfast, get a bowl of cereal and milk and do that. They don't have to have everything done for them. It's a fun age.
It is a fun age. How about those preteen years? That maybe it's like 11 to 13-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are still fun in my mind. There's still a high level of innocence.
Puberty's happening sometimes.
Yeah, that's happening, so that can complicate it a little bit. But I still think it's a very sweet time. So it's more the same at 6 to 10. You're connecting with them. You're seeing what they're interested in. You're engaging those interests. The whole school experience is helping highlight what those interests are. And you're interacting with them on those things to the extent that you can.
All right. Dum. The teenagers. Teenage years. What do you think? What are we doing there?
I think the teenage years, you're trying to prepare them to leave. So you've got to be giving, and I'm not saying I did this great. I think I did it better the more down the line with kids that I was. I think you're trying to give them more and more measured freedom to give them a chance to exercise those freedoms responsibly while they're still in the house. Because, if they go to college at age 18 and that college is out of state, they're on their own right at age 18. And all 5 of our kids at age 18 went away to college, went to different states. So you're trying to prepare them to really embrace responsibilities of adulthood. And yet it's still a time of them, sort of fleshing out their interests. They're at a higher level of participation in all the things that they're doing. And if they're really good at something, that can be a significant part of their lives. And I think it's a key time to really help them understand the value of family and the value of the body of Christ, because now they have some discretionary decisions. How are they using that time? What are they choosing to do at that time? And you're giving them commentary on that. Like, this would be an excellent way to serve your family or to serve the church. And you're giving them opportunities to do that. But you're also in a big discovery mode. Who is this person? What does this person want to do? They're thinking about college. What are they thinking about? So I think it's significant connection time, and it usually happens sometime between 10 o'clock and midnight because they're now staying up later, and you kind of got to flex with that. We had one of our kids, not very talkative, but that's when they wanted to talk, and Sue and I were getting in bed. So change your plan. We're going to talk. So I think you're really wanting to have open communication. You want them to feel the freedom to say anything that they want to say to you. Of course, you're giving feedback the whole time. So you're switching from the parent with authority to the advisor. You're still in both positions, but more and more you're recognizing your role is changing, and very soon you're going to be just the advisor. So you got to start working that territory a little bit. It can't just be, I'm saying this, do this. They're 16, they're 17 years old. They have to feel like they're being given some freedom.
Do you think they have the freedom to go to church or not go to church at 16, 17?
Well, different parents have different policies on that.
And is it different for a pastor's kid? Like my 16-year-old doesn't go to church, I'm the pastor.
The way I would advise our parishioners was you set this bar early, and it looks something like this. When you leave, you may decide that you don't want to continue attending church, and that will be your choice to make. But while you're here, this isn't a negotiable. And not only is it not negotiable, it's not negotiable as far as your attitude toward it. We expect you to participate with a good attitude. It's kind of like going to the doctor. Kids don't want to go to the doctor. They don't want to get a vaccine or whatever. It's like, look, that's not negotiable. When you get out, you may have a whole different point of view, and you're free to do that. But right now, these are the house rules, and set that bar early, kind of get that in their minds that that's not a negotiable, and that's part of them respecting their parents. So it's not harsh, but it's not open to discussion.
Yeah, it's not something to negotiate.
That's right.
Because you open that door a little bit, like,
well, that's
okay,
right. That's right.
If you go every other Sunday, we'll compromise on that.
Yeah, that's right. It's not good for them to do that, just like it's not good to miss doctor's appointments. These are things they need to do, whether they really feel like doing it or not. It's helpful.
I'm wondering if, Wes, you advise maybe what you and Sue have done. At 18, is there a shift of a gear? Like, vroom, we're in a new gear. They're 18. They're, quote unquote, technically an adult, right? Do rules change at 18? I mean, because I really think the more I hear what other parents have to say, what I see is you're kind of parenting till about 25, this next stage.
30, 35.
There you go. So let's talk about 18 to 25.
Yeah. I mean, 18, they become a legal adult.
Yeah, they can get up and leave if they want.
Whether that's smart or not is a whole nother question. I don't think it is smart, not in the way that we raise kids today.
Yeah, 18's,
They're not really ready to launch out in most cases, is my opinion. But nevertheless, they can. They're free to. What I taught my kids was you're not really an adult until you're financially independent. And so let's just agree on that. And, we're not resenting that we're still very much financially in the game, but we don't want attitudes like you don't get to say anything about our lives. No. That only happens when you decide you're on your own. And you're free to decide that. I decided that at age 18. I wanted to get out as quickly as I could, and I did. I got an apartment, and my mom helped me get a job. I bought my own car. I got an apartment. I paid 100% of my college. I was on my own. Kids today kind of want to be on their own while it's being subsidized. And we just said that's not going to work for us. And, they come home from college. They've been used to staying up till 1 and 2 in the morning or later. And, now they come home. Well, their parents are kind of old. And if they come in at 1 or 2 in the morning, they're going to wake me up. And I'm going to have trouble going back to sleep because my knees are cold. I mean, it's just unending. So, when they're home, we'd have to work that out. And we said, would you mind coming in by midnight? That would just help us. Part of it is I just had trouble really relaxing when they were still out. It's a typical parent reaction. And they said, no, that's perfectly reasonable. Because we weren't fussing at them that they weren't home by midnight at the college. We're not even keeping track of that. We don't have those telephones that you can, it's like, we don't want that. I don't like that idea at all. But we have to work together. Now you're at home. How do you feel about that? None of our kids gave us the least bit of grief about that. They didn't feel like, man, you're cramping my style here. All the other kids. It's like, well, I don't know about all the other kids. Maybe their parents are better sleepers than we are. I don't know. So I think until they're financially independent, we're recognizing we're still attached at the hip.
All right, well, that final stage, so to speak, where they are financially independent and they're truly out of the house, how does the relationship change with those adult children, even still as Christians? You can't demand that they're a believer.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't decide they've chosen a lifestyle, perhaps as an unbeliever, that you don't agree with, and so now I'm not talking to you anymore.
Yeah,
it's like that doesn't seem helpful.
Absolutely not. Again, the whole idea, this is a separate person. They're not just an appendage to you or to you and your wife. They're their own person. You have to accept them for who they are, and you have to accept the degree of involvement they want to have in your life as an adult, as an independent person. You can't demand that. See, we're right back to, why am I doing this? Did I parent this kid because of this great quid pro quo arrangement that once they became an adult, we would be best friends, BFFs, my wife with her daughters? No, that was not our expectation. Now, what parent wouldn't like that? There's not a parent out there that wouldn't like that, but we let go. They had to decide what they wanted to do. They had to decide what they were going to believe. They had to decide where they were going to live. They had to decide what level of engagement they wanted with us as adults. I personally think that's critical to having a healthy relationship with your adult children. I have seen more train wrecks where parents have this bucket load of expectations about what their grown kids should do, not only with their lives, but with their family. I've heard people talk about having rights as grandparents, and I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? Rights as grandparents? What do you think that means? I think you let them go, and if they want to come back around, fantastic. It's bonus time again, Rob, but it's not a right to be claimed. And I think when kids feel that, they're actually more prone to want to hang around because they don't feel like you're demanding some sort of contractual arrangement. If you want to go to the other set of in-laws for Christmas, that's fine. If you want to just have Christmas at your house, that's fine. Yeah, we've got our preferences, but that's all they are. They're preferences. There's nothing biblical that says, thou must have Christmas with thy grandparents. No, it doesn't say that. So I think the key is really letting them be who they are. I've thought about this question, Rob. What if one of my kids became a homosexual and they asked if they could bring their significant other home for Christmas? Tough one. Really a tough one. Alistair Begg got absolutely lambasted because he talked about going to a wedding.
Yeah, I think it was a grandmother. And
was it?
I think, and his advice was, if I remember correctly, go and bring a gift.
Yeah.
And he got canceled by some.
Yeah, he did. And I'm willing to be canceled by that same group because I think the best thing I could do for the gospel is accept that. And I'll tell you, when they come over, I'd be looking at chances to share the gospel with them and without being obnoxious. I think you do a lot better if you stay in the game with people. This is a choice they made, breaking my heart, absolutely breaking my heart, maybe even making me sick when I really think about how far that is from the gospel. But they're still your child, and I want to demonstrate acceptance for them, and I want to stay in the game. Parenting for the fourth quarter was a seminar I did. I want to stay in the game until the fourth quarter is over, until the buzzer rings. I want to stay in the game pleading for their souls. And it's hard to do that if they think you've just completely disapproved of you don't even want them around. I don't know how that communicates the gospel to somebody. So, yeah, I think accepting them, letting them go, letting them live their lives, and being willing to help at any turn so that all they have to do is call and you're there. All they have to do is ask for help and it's there. In that sense, you kind of continue being the parent. They're kind of your go-to. I'm honored that that's how my kids view us. And they're all responsible. They're all independent. I'm proud of every one of them. But they know we're in their corner. And whatever they need, we're there for them.
Yeah, and if you do sever the relationship because of a lifestyle choice, you can't be there for the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
You're not in the game.
You're not even in the game. I mean, I'm not making light. Those are hard situations, really hard situations, but it's still my child.
Wes, I wonder what you think about the idea of child-centered parenting. What is child-centered parenting, and is this a problem today in our culture?
My take on child-centered parenting is that the household generally revolves around the activities of the child, the interests of the child. And probably the biggest example of that would be some sort of sports commitment. And if the child is good, they can start getting on traveling teams.
Yeah, these club sports are big.
Club sports are big. Music can be the same way. The child is good in music, and now they're in any number of groups, regional groups, maybe even national groups. So the idea there is that your family centers around the children's wants, the children's interests. And I don't think that's healthy, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And yes, I think it's a chronic problem in America, even within the Christian church. My experience is that it's a very, very present problem for the church. Parents even deciding what church to go to based on what the child wants. I'm not talking about, mature teenagers. I'm talking about, younger kids, and that becomes the deciding factor as to where they go. I think the reason that it's a bad idea and that it's unhelpful to the children, not to mention to the parents, is because you're teaching the children, at least unwittingly and maybe even explicitly, that the world kind of revolves around them. I don't see how you reconcile that with, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Or let each of you regard one another as more important than himself, not looking to your own interests, but to the interests of others. I don't see how that orientation teaches children what it means to love other people and to be a servant to other people. So if our goal is to point our kids to Jesus Christ, then we have to demonstrate that. And I think, I did a 20-year experiment with my own kids. It could have turned out badly. I'm not arguing that because it didn't, therefore this is the way to do it. But, we made it clear to our kids that we were all for them and eager for the things they wanted to be involved with. But we said, we're not going to be able to go to every activity that you do. My son played on the football team for a few years. They actually went to the championship 2 years in a row, and he was starting part of that time. But most of the time, we didn't make it to the games. And we said, tell us all about it. We want to know what's going on, but we have our lives. And this is what we're doing, and we'll have to be selective as to what activities we go to. We didn't go to all their concerts. We weren't able to attend the other kids' sporting events, all the events. There were things that happened. We just couldn't get to all those things. And our kids never thought, they never took that to mean that we weren't interested in them. We were very interested. We loved to hear the story when they got home from the things, but there were just conflicts with church kinds of things in the evening. And I think if the kids know you love them, they actually can respect that. I think a lot of kids disrespect their parents because they don't have their own lives. They see it, and then they cling to their children, and then They follow their children wherever they go, and even finally when they move to be around their children. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I think it can communicate the wrong thing. It can communicate that the family and our relationships are more important than the body of Christ. And we didn't want to communicate that. We wanted our kids to understand that to follow Christ is to value the body of Christ. And, that means that family things have to be sacrificed sometimes. And somehow our kids didn't come away with the message that you don't value us. They never thought that. And I think it's because to the extent we were involved, we were sincerely involved. And when we couldn't go to things, we still were very interested. How did it go? How did the game go? Our daughters played tennis. How did the tennis match go? So I think it sends the wrong message to our kids.
And you wanted to be there. It's not that you didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
That you weren't interested.
Yeah.
But
I wasn't blowing it off because, I think I'll go golfing instead. No. And I think they respected that. It's interesting. I got a Father's Day card from one of my sons this past Father's Day. And this was a son who probably had felt I was a little negligent. He's a good son. But, now he's a parent. He's involved in his church. It was the sweetest Father's Day card I've ever received. So thoughtfully written. And, the upshot of it was that he confessed that there were times when he resented my lifestyle. And he said, now, looking at life where I am, my kids are in their 30s and 40s now, he said, I now realize that you were committed to Christ, and in that way you were the very best example you could be to me, and I'm so grateful for your example. And now, it took him 40 years to get there. And I'm not saying, I was waiting for him to get there, but what that communicated to me, Rob, was that what we were trying to teach him registered. And he saw it. And he saw that of supreme value is our commitment to Christ, even if that means we sacrifice things we'd really like to do, like go to all of our kids' activities. And he saw it for all it was worth and was appreciative to me for it. Touched my heart. But I thought, okay, that's what we wanted to teach you. That you got it. That's it.
That's pretty neat. I want to close on this, Wes, just going back to a little bit of what you talked about, that mom and dad have a life outside of their children. And maybe you could talk a little bit about as we become empty nesters and that kind of thing, is that, yes, clearly we're committed to the church, we're committed to Christ, but then the next commitment is to one another, that the two shall be one, that you're one flesh, not with your kids, but with your spouse. How does that affect those final stages of parenting and once they're out of the house? Do you think that's something we really want to communicate to our children, that your mom is more important, in a sense,
than you?
Yeah, I think it affects the whole parenting experience. I think you want to be communicating that throughout the whole parenting experience, because that's what's going to best prepare them for marriage. When they see that these other things are not derailing the centrality of your relationship. And that's what happens with a lot of parents. They become kid-centric and their relationship drifts. They're not working at keeping it fresh. The romance is stale. And suddenly they wake up one day and they look around and it's like, who is that person? And I'm not particularly attracted to that person anymore because we've been running around with AAU basketball or who knows what. So I think that we're trying to set that bar from the get-go, that they understand that that relationship is more important. And, practical ways that works itself out. You're talking to your spouse and, the teenager wants something, and of course they need it like 10 minutes ago, and you're just saying, we'll get with you, but right now Dad's talking to Mom. And it's kind of a real clear signal. Not that we're shutting you out, but first of all, we were already talking, and second of all, we're going to finish talking, and that's a priority. We're not going to just be at your whim. And, kids, they figure that out real fast. They kind of see it, and they're not resentful. Shoot, he likes her better than me. They're not really thinking like that, but they're seeing this is a couple that values their relationship, and they're working at it. And I'm real proud of my kids in the way they've worked at their marriages. And all of their marriages, I'm very pleased with the state of those marriages. And I think they saw that. And they're not shunning their kids. They're not, short-circuiting any relationships with their kids, but they're working at their relationship with one another. So.
Yeah, and you let them know, I picked her. I didn't pick you.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to have to live with her after you're gone. Right. So we really want to get this one right.
Yeah, good. Well, there's been some really good words here, Wes, some really great advice and good perspective. You always have a way of surprising me with your answers in a really good way. It's just, it's much deeper, a little more philosophical, and always centered right back on the truth of the word and the gospel. So thank you. This is
you're welcome.
So much fun.
Yeah, thank you too, Rob.
To learn more about the Net Center for Church Planning and Revitalization's training and sending programs, visit us online at thenetcenter.org. For questions or comments, email us at pastorpastor@thenetcenter.org. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and consider sharing this episode with a friend. This podcast is a production of the Net Center for Church Planning and Revitalization. Nets, for the life of the church.